Hello and welcome to attaQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host and you're watching a attaQ episode. This is Volt by Numerical Audio. It looks great, it sounds great, and unfortunately it came out when Moog released their Mini Moog emulation for iOS Model D, and it kind of got all of the spotlight, so I thought it was time to shine a proper light on Volt. Volt has a sound very similar to the I'll just let Kai, the developer himself from Numerical Audio, describe what the synthesizer sounds like.
Expression and playing really was one key point. The next thing was the sounds it could produce, and the goal for this really was the early 80s, late 70s analog poly sound, which at the time was everywhere. I'd compare it to something like the early Prophets or Oberheims or Rolands. Sonically, it doesn't try to copy any of those, but it goes in that direction, and the voicing and the voice structure is made up in a way that it allows not all, but most of the sounds you would have made on a synth back then, or you would want now if you want that sound from back then.
Now personally, I think that Kai has done a proper bang-up job with Volt. So it's a polyphonic virtual analog type synthesizer. It was designed to be very expressive, and so it's got support for MPE, polychannel aftertouch, and 2D touch keyboard. Volt also has some really nice effects built into it, which isn't that surprising seeing how Kai has released effect apps before. So let's talk about connectivity, because Volt has everything you could possibly want as soon as you get it from the App Store. So it's got support for audio bus, inter-app audio, you can load it up as an audio unit extension inside your most favorite DAW, it's got MIDI, and you can also map your MIDI controllers to all of the controlling elements inside of Volt. Yes, and all of that works over wired connections, network connections, and even through Bluetooth. And on top of all of that, it's even got Ableton link support. Way to go, Kai. Personally, I love the look of Volt. I absolutely love the graphic design. Now, Kai went for a skeuomorphic design. Skeuomorphic what? Well, skeuomorphic means that you're basically designing something to look like something that exists in the real world. And this is something that Kai himself believes that we're gonna keep seeing when it comes to app development. Here's what he had to say about it.
I try to make it look like something that could exist, because I think it's a lot easier to use if it looks like something that could exist in real life, even if it's not an exact copy of an existing device. But the fact that a knob looks like something you can touch, or a button or a fader instantly tells you how to use it, and you don't even think about it. Whereas with totally abstract interfaces, like I like to use Ableton as an example for this. It's a great app, and I use it for many years, and I want to live without it. But it's, I think, the exact opposite of it. It's so abstract that it's a completely new thing to learn, even if you use other DAWs or music stuff or hardware for many years. It's completely new. Whereas if you take something like a Reason, for instance, which is it's the exact opposite of Ableton. It looks like real, and even though at that point when I used it, I had never used the real hardware, I still instantly knew how to use Reason back then. You had your knobs, you had your virtual patch cables and all that stuff. I think it makes sense, and that's why I think even though so much has gone flat these days in terms of design, I think you will continue to see it because it makes a lot of sense.
let's have a look under the hood of Volt. It's basically got 3 sections, but they're all seamlessly connected. And so if you look up here, you have 3 switches, but you can actually slide in between the different sections, and there really aren't any pages to this synthesizer. So if we look at the main and we have a look at the VCO section, VCO meaning voltage controlled oscillator. And here you've got a knob where you can mix between a saw and a square waveform. You also got a sub oscillator with a 3-octave switch, and you can even select the waveforms for that one down here. Next to the oscillator section, we can find the mix, giving you controls over the levels for the main oscillator, the sub-oscillator, and also the ability to add noise. Next to the mix section, we can find the VCF, and VCF means voltage controlled filter. So yeah, this is the filter section. Now, since Kai wanted Volt to go in a direction where it could produce sounds that were sounding more like the old polysound synths, like the Oberheim, he also made sure to put in a SEM-type filter in there. And regarding that, Kai didn't have access to a real Oberheim synthesizer, but he did have access to an OB6 because he owns one. So he used the filters inside the OB6 to tune the filters inside Volt. Next to the filter section, we have the LFO. This one can actually be set to an audible range of frequency. Okay, so the thing is, LFO means low frequency oscillator. It's basically an oscillator running at a very low frequency, because that's something you want when you're controlling stuff like sweeping a filter up and down automatically. But in Volt, you can actually turn this over into the audible range, meaning you can make the LFO run as a high frequency oscillator, meaning you can make it run as an oscillator. So you can actually do some FM synthesis thanks to this. Next to the LFO, we have the envelope sections, one for the amplifier and one for the modulation. And the modulation envelope can actually be looped, turning it into more of an LFO type modulation signal. And not only that, you can also sync it to the BPM. Now, if you look closely, you can see that Kai has color-coded all of the controls here. All of the main synthesizer controls are in orange, while the modulation controls are in gray, so they are always easy to find. Basically, you can modulate any of the synthesizer controls in here with the modulation signals just by tweaking these knobs in gray. Next, we have the output settings, including a drive section where you can add a bit of grit to your synth sounds. Here we can also find the effect section that I mentioned earlier, and so you've got access to a chorus, a echo delay, and a reverb. So far I haven't really criticized anything inside Volt, and that's because I haven't found anything to criticize except from one thing, and it has to do with the reverb section. You see, I really like being able to filter out the bass frequencies inside my reverb tails because I don't like my reverbs becoming too rumble-like or muddy. And in Volt we don't have that. Either way, it's not really that big of a deal, and in any case, everything else that is good in Volt just outshines the fact that it doesn't have a high-pass filter for the reverb. I always complain about that, don't I? Now we're not done with all of the features inside Volt. If we go to the left here, we can find the play mode section where you can control the portamento, and then we have the voicing. Yes, it's got a voicing option, so you can run it either in poly or unison, and when you run it in unison, you can run it up to 8 voices. I just want to highlight the arpeggiator. Yes, Volt has an arpeggiator. It's located right here. It's got a range of 3 octaves, and it's also got 5 different arpeggiator modes. Now, staying on the left here, we can find all of the other controls tied to the expressiveness of Volt. So we've got the normal controls such as the pitch bend and the mod wheel. Next we have the pressure and slide options. And the slide option can actually be used directly on the built-in keyboard here inside Volt. So let's just up this control a little bit and then just add the filter as a target. Now, when I press down my finger on a key here and slide it up and down, I'm able to control the filter. And that's pretty much how this works. Very straightforward. Now the last section, the pressure, has to do with the MPE compatibility thing. So if you've got an MPE style controller, like one of the Roli controllers, then you can tie the key pressure to various things inside the synthesizer. Now, during my interview with Kai, I found out the real reason to why Volt is MPE compatible. And I'll just let Kai tell you himself.
I've owned the Seaboard Rise, the 25 key for, I don't know, a year or two maybe. And actually, I started implementing the MPE spec and working on this synth, I don't know, 2 years ago or so, and just so I had a reason to buy a Seaboard. Yeah, I really wanted one, but I couldn't justify buying one just for fun. So a thing I like to do, if I want something, I try to think of ways to make a product out of it or incorporate it into a product of mine. So I can justify buying it.
I'm about to round up this video, but there are a few things I just want to get through and clarify before I actually end all of this. And all of this, I make it sound so dramatic. And one of the things I want to clarify is how you save your presets. It actually took me a little while to figure out how to do that. So let's just open up the preset menu first by pressing here at the browser button. Now it will take you to the factory list if you've just opened the synth. So to save your own preset, you have to go to the user menu, and you do that by pressing down here on user. Next, you need to actually choose a subcategory. So let's say you want to save a bass sound. We press on bass, go in there, and here we can now save our preset. We have to locate the plus sign right up here. Pressing that will give you a, fill in your name text prompt. Just do that, press OK, and you have saved your preset. Also, you can find the Ableton link sync setting up here to the left, and up here to the right you can find the MIDI section. And this is the menu you open up to enable Volt to receive MIDI CC data. Now, I highly recommend Volt. It's a great synthesizer, and you don't actually have to own an MPE style controller to get use out of Volt. No, I mean, it sounds great. It works well as a regular synthesizer. If you do have an MPE type controller like a Roli Seaboard, then of course it will add that extra expressiveness. But you really don't need it in order to use Volt. I'll put an app link down in the description so you can go check it out yourself. I also suggest that you go check out Kai's previous effect apps. Now, for those of you viewers who have stuck around, I've got a little bonus for you. So during my interview with Kai, I also asked him the question, is he a musician? And I also asked him how he uses the iPad when making music, and he answered that. So instead of just talking about my Patreon and my PayPal and stuff like that, I'm gonna play the clip in where he answers those questions. Thank you so much for watching. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it. And to end this off, here's Kai.
Maybe I try to be it if I find the time. I mean, I've been making music for 20 years or something, more or less, in different degrees, but I've never been considered myself someone who aims to produce music or make a living with music. I just do it for fun. It's always fun. If I just want to jam, I start with running some sequences, and then usually I just improvise for an hour or so. What I use for this, if it's a half synth or a soft synth, that usually depends. If I'm working on a synth, I usually use that thing to make music, but it really varies. Personally, I use the iPad mostly I integrate it in my setup like any other instrument. So for me, it's not really a replacement for my typical desktop DAW, but more like I use it like a host. I run a synth on it, and I play just that synth which is on screen. And yeah, that's probably how I use the iPad most. I use it either as an effects processor in a sound loop on my mixer, or I play a synth. But I usually just one thing at a time, not multiple things like you do if you would produce a full song on just the iPad.